You know hypnagogia, when you're falling asleep and may experience like hallucinations or some shit, or you kind of wake up in the middle of the night and your brain just starts fucking schizo ranting or some shit. I don't know if that's happened to you. Like you wake up. Actually, wait, no. I should say when you wake up and have these weird kind of sleepy hallucinations, those are called hypnopompic hallucinations, not hypnagogic hallucinations. I'm just saying that because I know there's gonna be some fucking nerd in my comments saying, oh, they're actually hypnopompic hallucinations or whatever. But my point is, hypnagogia is a very interesting state to be in because it's obviously like right before you enter dreams, and so you can kind of, if you become aware during hypnagogia, kind of pay attention to your brain being on like autopilot and just coming up with its own shit. And unlike lucid dreaming, you can enter this state. I hear my fucking dogs making noise. I don't know what they're doing. You can enter this state kind of in the day when you're having a nap, or you can enter it right before sleeping. You don't need to, unlike lucid dreaming, you don't need to like wake up in the middle of the night and do all these fucking techniques and whatever. And I have talked about hypnagogic hallucination before. I actually went and rewatched the video I made on it. You know what? I am a funny guy. It was a good fucking video, but like I will say, the techniques in it were kind of arse. I was just like, retain some awareness as you fall asleep. That's not very helpful. So I did some digging and I'm about to shoot my load of information onto you. My information on hypnagogic hallucinations that I got, mostly from Dream Views, that lucid dreaming forum. Of course, I'm always on the lookout for like some obscure esoteric knowledge and shit like that, which I have found. And you need to know there's kind of two, I guess, ways to enter hypnagogic hallucinations. The first one is just kind of retaining awareness as you fall asleep, like I said. And I guess these retaining awareness techniques are similar to wake-induced or wake-initiated lucid dreaming techniques, which is entering straight into a lucid dream. So when you do these techniques for lucid dreaming, it's like it's common that you may experience like hypnagogia as you're doing it, because you always experience hypnagogia kind of as you're falling asleep. So techniques like this are like the shit Thomas Edison did. You know, that inventor guy, I mentioned him before. He used to take naps. Apparently this guy, Thomas Edison, slept only 4 hours a day, and so he took lots of naps. And when he took his naps, he held like a metal ball, and as he was falling asleep, kind of dropped this ball, and then that obviously woke him up, so he would be able to like get ideas and shit. Hypnagogic state is like really good for getting ideas. So that's kind of the retaining awareness thing. I know Stephen LaBerge also I'll say these techniques are interesting, but I found some much better ones that are about manually kind of forcing yourself into hypnagogia, which I think is much better. But Stephen LaBerge, the guy who helped prove lucid dreaming, wrote Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, he also had a technique where he like held his arm up as he was falling asleep or some shit, or in a nap, and then obviously he fell asleep and his arm kind of fell, which kind of jolted him awake, and he can get ideas and like experience hypnagogia and shit like that. So those techniques are interesting. Also, the Thomas Edison motherfucker, that guy may have just been experiencing like REM rebound from the fucking sleep deprivation. This dude was sleeping 4 hours a day. So if he was kind of napping in the day, it's a good chance he was just entering into like REM sleep and having normal dreams. So I don't know if that was necessarily hypnagogia, but the other techniques, which I've not talked about before, are mimicking hypnagogia and kind of forcing your brain to enter straight into hypnagogia. And I actually came up with the ideas. Actually, I'm going to tell you how I came up with it. I'm just going to get into the technique. So I found a technique on Reddit. I'll explain the background later. I found a technique on Reddit from this guy who claimed he could like start forcing the hypnagogic process. So before he went to sleep, he could force his brain to enter hypnagogia and start hallucinating. And he did this by cycling through images in his brain. And what I mean by that is, you know how when you're first falling asleep, different people will fall asleep differently, but you may start daydreaming or kind of just looking at images in your head or thinking about nothing. This guy instead starts cycling through images. So he thinks of like, I don't know, say you're thinking of a bird, and then suddenly a fucking picnic blanket pops into your head or some shit. Just cycle through these images and cycle through these images, if that makes sense. And eventually you should notice that this cycling of images that's happening quickly starts becoming like automatic, and that's your brain entering into hypnagogia. And at that point where you notice your brain is kind of cycling through these images by itself, that is hypnagogia, because all it is your brain kind of coming up with its own hallucinations. That's why it's like a hallucination, because you're not controlling that shit, and it can be like really scary, right? So that's that technique. And I actually the way I found this was searching up about image streaming, because I don't know if you've heard about image streaming, but it's kind of this technique to improve your visualization and increase your IQ or some shit. It's basically a similar thing where you cycle through images but describe them out loud. And the more you describe the image, like the more detail will fill in your mind. And this improves like your visualization. And when I was reading about image streaming, I was like, shit, that is really similar kind of to like hypnagogia, in that it keeps cycling through images and like forming random shit. So that's how I found the technique on Reddit. Now, there is another interesting technique I found on Dream Views from someone called Rue J, and they claimed they found a way to mimic hypnagogic hallucinations and so enter into them sometimes even within a few minutes. And their technique is really simple, very interesting. I've never seen it before, and it basically involves imagining your friend talking. So as you're falling asleep, imagine someone or your friend or whatever just talking, and kind of imagine the first few words are in English, but after that kind of just make them mumbled or jumbled words or whatever. Make it a very, very passive process, because if you're paying kind of full attention to this talking thing, you're probably going to be way too conscious to enter hypnagogia or like fall asleep. So when you're imagining your friend talking, kind of don't even pay attention to the words. You know what? I don't know if this is making sense. Kind of just imagine them saying random shit, talking like some motherfucker from The Sims or something. Also, The Sims. My daughter was a vegetarian. I'm sorry, that's so random. I started a new Sims game and my firstborn daughter was born a fucking vegetarian. Can you believe that? In the Sims thing, that's so off topic. Okay, just yeah, imagine your friend talking, and this is actually a perfect technique because it's very it's similar to a wake initiated lucid dreaming technique, in that it allows you to fall asleep while retaining some awareness, but not enough to keep you awake. And he later adjusted this technique on another forum post on Dream Views and said, imagine two voices talking, and this will be even better. And he claimed with this, he was able to, as I said, enter hypnagogia, like enter that shit sometimes within a few minutes. And he also talked about another thing which was called, what was it called? It was oh yeah, he talked about something called the rogue mind, and this was kind of his name, the rogue mind, for your brain kind of going and doing its own shit. Like I said, in hypnagogia, you're experiencing hallucinations because your mind is just automatically doing its own shit. And so he says you can seed an image in the rogue mind, and this is kind of how we are able to influence the hypnagogia for creative ideas. I hope this makes sense. I kind of feel like I'm rambling on with no like good script or some shit, but if you are able to seed the hypnagogia, and I can give you an example of doing this, it's very easy. You can use it for creative solutions. You can use it to kind of just, I don't know, have a mini dream of what you want to dream about. Hypnagogia is not a full dream. It's kind of like a liminal dream or some shit, a mini dream. And to do this, which I can actually talk about, which I did this morning when I woke up and I was really sleepy, and so kind of entering hypnagogia as I was falling back asleep, but at the same time I didn't want to fall back asleep, so I was kind of able to enter the hallucinations quite easily. You can kind of guide the hallucinations like you're guiding a dog on a really long leash without forcing it to go anywhere, because you kind of want your brain to do the heavy work on its own. And so kind of when you're aware of these hypnagogic hallucinations, say I want some YouTube ideas, I want some fucking YouTube ideas, think of like looking at YouTube and like looking at my channel and looking at the videos. And once you do that, you're kind of not forcing your brain to do anything, just giving it the suggestion of kind of what you want the hallucination to like follow. And once you do that, it will kind of start going in the direction. It may kind of go off in its own direction and go to like wherever it wants to go, your brain just doing its own shit. But you can kind of just keep suggesting it and nudging it in a general direction. And if you get good at this, you can like make your hypnagogic hallucinations, make your own fucking movie or some shit. I think that's what Ru J or someone else talked about. They talked about how ever since they were little, they could kind of create a movie in their head from their hypnagogic hallucinations because they're aware of them and they can watch them and kind of seed them with a suggestion. I'm gonna stop fucking yapping, bro. Holy shit. My point is, if you want to enter hypnagogic hallucinations, the best way is probably to start mimicking how hypnagogia works, which is either cycling through images or doing that shit like imagining your friend talk, which is a very unique technique for entering hypnagogia. But this shit's interesting, and I will add as a side note, I think actually the best way to practice entering hypnagogia is by doing it after you wake up in the morning, because your brain is kind of in this sleepy state, and preferably wake up like a little before you would usually wake up so you have time to kind of just lay in bed without falling asleep, but at the same time you're sleepy enough to kind of have your brain go off and do its own shit, if that makes sense. I feel like this has been very unstructured, and I probably sound like a schizophrenic motherfucker, so I hope this makes sense. But yeah, don't join the Discord. I love you. Goodbye.